Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm
Good
Sean Mahoney with
morning.
NetSwitch. I'm here with
And
Stanley Lee of NetSwitch as well. Stanley's our CEO and founder. Thank you for joining us for the CyberRisk governance system for technologists. We have spoken about the executives and how the CRG system can work for them. And we spoke to governors last time, the internal auditors and compliance people last time, Stanley. And today we're going to talk to the technologists, the IT people. And this may be maybe one of the hardest crowds to talk to.
yes.
they they get pitched on new things all the time and new ideas all the time, and they are pitched so many different toy options that's going to change their lives, and
And
yet
also, this is the group that gets to do it on a daily basis.
yeah, yeah, true. So just to let everybody know who we are again, Stanley and has started this company 22 years ago. And we've been doing this for over 22 years. We started as a managed service provider, evolved into a security product company with some proprietary VAPT stuff, and really started doing this. And this was doing MDR as a cybersecurity company when I was a client of NetSwitch. And Gartner didn't even have the term of MDR until 2016 when they identified NetSwitch as a pioneer in the space. We've continued to grow and refine what we do. And we have come up with this idea of the cyber risk governance, but it's really not a product that we're trying to sell to people. We're trying to get a community of businesses and the three stakeholders to understand the system and understand its value and what it can do for their organizations. And then so you see in 2021 when we patented the system, it really is designed to help organizations better communicate and illustrate the risk to their environments. So let's talk a little bit about what this means for technologists, because we know that technologists, the IT department, is responsible and answerable to everybody in the organization. Governors have their little area, executives are responsible for the whole organization, but IT fix it. IT do this, IT can do this. So we know that they're responsible to everyone, and they have limited resources. They have limited people, they have limited time, and those budgets are just evaporating, particularly with this pandemic lately. And
Yeah.
so, we understand that. And this conversation really today is how to help address some of those things, how to make IT's life a little bit easier.
Yes. Well, of course, in 28 years in this industry, I've seen a lot already. So, one thing that I feel, of course, that we know that we always stuck in between a rock and a hard place. I was an
Right.
engineer to start with, and starting pulling cabling, and then went all the way into become a network consultant before I started NetSwitch. And throughout the last 22 years, and seen a lot of changes. As I talking to my peers, and people are much smarter than me, and we kind of share the timeline. Every 3 5 years there's going to
Yeah.
be a new type of technology that comes on board. And if you don't try to start shifting towards the new technology, let's just say cloud as one,
Right.
another 5 year later you probably needs to look for another job. Because you got to ride the wave, you got to ride it, and you're gonna adapt to it, and adapt and changes, and we always have to do as technologists. And but the other two group is very different. The other two group, you look at the regulations, you look at the business objective, and they can manage along the way, and they can create their own objective, so to speak,
Mhm.
based on a certain guideline. Technologies always have to adapt to all those elements from the company's objectives. And now in the cybersecurity, that not just dealing with the technology, but we have to deal with the governance process. And
Yeah.
even though I started, we started 17 years ago into cybersecurity, and back then it was, I remember my first certificate in anything to do with network security. That certificate, to name it, is network management. It has nothing to do with security at all. And I was about maybe 23, 25 years ago. And then 17 years ago, as we start getting into it, it was network security, and
Right.
now it becomes more in an infosec. So as you can just look at the terminology, how it changes, how it evolves. And one thing that I feel that as a technologist myself is the burden, the responsibility did not get less, it just got more.
Right.
Even though as the corporate has the business objective and to comply to GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, then it hire more people in as an internal auditor, compliance
Hmm.
manager, and risk manager. The technologist's role has not been decreased; it still continue to climb. As we have talked to some of the CIO
Right.
um, in our podcasts, then they share their story with us. You know, CIO and Sean, you talked to a few of them
Yep.
that they get burned out pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons of that is, Sean, you can explain more, is because everybody wants to go to the used to be CIO or COO that manage the technology. Now CISO is the go-to person.
Right.
And
Right.
it goes down from the CIO all the way down. And now we're talking about, it's just getting more and more. But how do we deal with it? Budget getting less and less, like you're talking about.
Right. And it's how to be more efficient, how to streamline things, how to automate as much as possible. And I know that's sort of a buzzword, automation. Here's a map of in some ways I'm sort of jealous of Europe. GDPR covered all of Europe. One law, all of Europe. The United States has, I think, at a national level, has failed all of us in not coming up with a federal standard. And I know state rights, everybody wants their own thing, but we're going to have 50 laws, at least 50 different states that you're going to need to comply with.
And this is a
And
perfect example. I think we got to share with the audience with our case. Please tell
yeah,
them about our famous luxurious hotel brand in the world and
well,
small company in
we'll get to that in
in
a second. But here we're dealing with 50 different laws that a company is going to that may be a national company or a regional company that may end up doing 10 states. The business understands they're going to have to do this. They're going to hand it off to the internal auditors, the risk people, to ensure that they have the proper documentation, the policies and procedures documented. At the end of the day, it's going to fall to the IT team, the technologist, to implement all of those controls and to validate those controls on an ongoing basis and advise the company and HR of employee violations of those things. And then you deal with, as you said, Stanley, our client who's a global organization. They have to deal with, what did we count up? 15 different
well, at least that
national.
we categorize in four different level of regulations.
Right. It was federal, it was state, it was regional, it was industry. It's it's crazy. And not all of them have the same controls, the same policies and procedures that you can say, okay, if we're good with PCI DSS, we're good with everything else. There's all these little offshoots, all these little tangents. And the IT department's going to be responsible for ensuring that those controls, those configurations are all implemented and properly configured at all times. How are you going to do that? So it's not an easy undertaking. So
Well, we already got a comment from our audience. Also true. Thank you for sharing your comment. And by the way, I just want to let you know some of the comment because
Fernando's going there. Preach.
yeah, exactly. That's what we don't want to do. We want to talk about solutions. We want to get to that. But at the same time, I would just want to make sure that you guys understand if we cannot address your comment right now, please connect us at the CRG group, CyberRisk Governance group in LinkedIn, and we will answer all your questions and comments in over there. So thank you for your sharing your comment. So yeah, we all know this. We're pitching to the choir right now. So and then going back into what I just started to talk about that case, and I think that it's a very good example because this is a company that they don't have a big budget for IT. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, that they are in the hospitality hotel industry, and as we all know, last 3 years what happened to the whole, or last 2 years what happened to the hotel industry.
And they have operations in California. So let's go to that next
Well,
slide.
yeah, let's paint that. It's an Asia-based headquarter, but
Yep.
they have hotels. They only have about 15 hotels, but they are one of the most luxurious brands. So, the pressure, the responsibility from the pressure is humongous. But they have customers all over the world, coming from all over the world. So they have to comply with GDPR. They have to comply their Asia. I'm not going to tell where. They are a publicly trading company, so they have to comply with that. They have, and they have in United States 4 hotel, but out of
Yep.
3 different states. So right now they on the 2 of the red. And then of course industry, like we talk about PCI DSS. Okay,
Right.
so where we're going to talk about is how do they do it several years ago, and when
Well,
we
let's just
start.
look at CCPA here. For each incident, for each violation, if you have a violation in California, and this is the problem with that companies are going to face across the country, is that the laws are being written very similar to California. If there's a violation, the reporting is not to the FBI, who's going to treat you as a victim. It's going to be the state attorney general, who's an elected official, whose job is to prosecute wrongdoing. You have now just wronged a citizen of that state, an elected, somebody that elects the politicians, an attorney general. You violated their personal data, their data privacy. And so an attorney general who may want to make their name for themselves is going to prosecute that organization. And it's really not going to matter the size of the organization. On top of that, with California in particular, a citizen can bring a suit against you. So you're going to have other lawyers coming against the company. Class action lawsuits can be filed against the organization for data violations. And you can say, well, we don't meet the criteria for CCPA if you read the requirements to comply. But if you talk to an attorney, and we are not attorneys, but an attorney is going to tell you, but you may. The ambiguity in law, in particular with CCPA, you might fall into an area that could expose you to prosecution or to a lawsuit. So it's important that the IT department understand these things and keep in mind the things if they're going to be talking to a vendor to assist with security, to assist with assessments in the IT area. And it's going to be critical that IT can properly communicate with management to determine what those adequate protections are so that the funding can be put in place, because we know it's going to fall to the IT department to protect that data. Put the things in place to protect it. And so if it's going to fall to the IT people, at least have a way to communicate properly and clearly to management to get that budget allocation. So
And few great point that you mentioned, Sean. One is we are not the expert on everything. We cannot be. There's nobody, even IBM cannot do it all. So that's why how we wanted to get you guys together and talk with the governors in the CRG group that we posted on LinkedIn, and some of them might be business executive, to share and to collaborate what we are trying to accomplish, to put in this type of system based on your experience, and how can we effectively and efficiently to get the message to share across the organizations into all the stockholders, including some of the staff, so they can bring up their awareness, bring up their
yeah.
knowledge, learning through the process, and then they can see by using our dashboard and environment data visualizations. Okay, they can see the actual action going through it. And at the same time that Sean, you talked about keep in mind with the vendors separations of duties, and that's
Hmm.
why nobody should be doing it all anyway, even though they have all the resource they can do that. So these are the things that it impact the cost and the responsibility of liability. Going back one part about earlier talk about this client in the hospitality, the ambiguity of by the third party auditor that after a whole year that they spending, complying to the regulations, that the third party auditor could come back and said, and this is a true story, well, you might have done a pen test, but you have not done an external pen test. That's why I'm not going to pass you. So this
Yeah.
was the one case that we have, share among ourselves. And we see that from a lot of organization when they going through, even though when they have internal auditors or they have third party auditors to help them along the way, but these type of communication might fail through the gap, or it might not be properly translated or interpreted. So when that happens, these type of tasks, it takes another 30 or 60 days just to go back to the drawing board to redo it all. I mean, well, maybe refining it, I should say, not redoing it all, but even refining,
Hmm.
and then put it back into the agenda to execute it. By
Yeah.
that time, but don't forget, this is just one. When it comes to 30 days, 60 days, whatever the time frame, each organization is different. That got delayed by one task. Just multiply by 10, 20, or dozens of them. That would trigger a big problem all the way up to the board of directors nowadays.
Yeah. Uh, Rick, you're right. It's the underwriters. I presume you're talking about insurance companies. Insurance companies are putting this burden of protecting data onto the organizations in the new continuation of cyber policies. The underwriters want to know if the company has policies and procedures for certain things, but it does fall to IT to evidence the enforcement of those policies and procedures, and then the logging and tracking of those procedures over time to evidence that you're continuing to do these things, because management is going to sit there and go, well, yeah, we do MFA. Well, people realize as they get audited, well, we do MFA on the crown jewels, but we don't do MFA through the rest of the organization. And so that really doesn't comply with what the cyber insurance policy wanted to ensure that you were doing as an organization, is that MFA is enforced throughout the company that touches any company assets. And so that, yeah, it is falling again, like we said, IT answers to everyone. At the end of the day, they have to do the work. So going back to this global client that we're dealing with, we work with them on researching new technologies, understanding their security stack, and finding new things, new tools that they should be doing. And we were talking to them recently, and they asked us, we're happy with what we're doing, but what's the one solution we're missing in our security stack that we've helped them build over the years? What's the one thing we're missing? And we weren't flippant about it, but we asked them back, well, where are you? We know where you started because we did this a couple of years ago with you. Uh,
17 years ago when I started with them on all of
yeah,
our
like I
cybersecurity.
said, a couple of years ago, Stanley. As we get older, that's just a couple of years ago.
Don't take my credit away. That's tiny little credit that I
Yeah.
have.
I mean, so anyway, we know where they want to be. And it's this path. You keep moving along this path. So we just asked them, where are you? It's that pin drop in a map along your journey. Where are you today? We know where you were a couple of years ago when we helped them. We were looking at some new solutions with them, Stanley, and we helped evaluate their network. And we'll get to some of those statistics in a few minutes. But we did the same thing. We Where are you? So we can pinpoint and baseline to move forward in the conversation with them. So we asked them the other day, well, where are you? And they said, well, what do you want to do? So it was,
Just to share a little bit about this as well. Where are you? Push, pull, going back and forth. And actually, this started again in 17 years ago. And it was funny because back then, SOX is just starting to rolling out. But because of their background, they wanted to be responsible corporations. So that's when they start pushing, asking, okay, what do we do? What is that? Also, that question came up with one, what is that one regulation that we should follow? And then it goes back and forth. And a lot of time that our audience and our customers and telling us, yeah, where do we start? That was the question,
yeah,
either from business executives, governors, or technologists. Where do we start? And going back into the pin drop, right? And that's part of why we evolve and to try to address some of the comment at the same time. Insurance, everybody's worried about it. Yes, it's getting worse. And we talk to many of those insurance companies, and that's why we want to partner up with them and actually utilizing our CRG system as the underlining underwriting system. So at least that they know from coming from an unbiased perspective, what do we need to do in the next 6 months or next 9 months so they can be prepared the budget, preparing their internal teams to answering the insurance companies underwriting process or answering some of the consultant, our partners, their governance suggestions and recommendations. So that's the whole thing. What we wanted to do with the CRG system is to have that preparedness via communications, collaborations. And now going back into, okay, where do we start? How are we going to get there? It's a huge question. And yes, we have already spent millions of dollars into our organization, into the infrastructure, or some of the smaller size might be hundreds of thousands, years of effort. Again, going back into, well, how do I start to comply to whatever standard? Yes, ISO 27001 is one of them. NIST CSF is another one from the
hmm
global perspective. That is just the global as a framework, what we're talking about, but it has nothing to do with the regulations. Yes, it can address a lot of the sub controls, the subcategories on different aspect of things. But again, are you guys still using Excel spreadsheet to share those information? That's another thing that we say, oh my goodness, it's still in the Excel spreadsheet era. Yes, we love Excel, nothing wrong with that. But when you have 30, 40 of them and try to keep track of it and going back into constantly, okay, where are we? Well, are you going to flip through those Excel spreadsheet and try to find out what we have done or have not done 3 months ago or even 3 weeks ago? That's where we see the complications in the processes, along with all the objectives that we have talked about in the last 20 minutes. And how do you consolidate them? How do you bring them together in an unbiased way, in a consistency, with the consistency that you can look at these and then share the communications and collaborations with all the stakeholders, not just in the management, but also the people below?
yep, yep.
Where do we start, Sean?
We did, as I said, we did this a couple years ago with the same client, and we did this pin drop thing with them. And when we started with them to help fine tune and refine their systems in a process, we were changing the way they were doing their SecOps and their security operations team. And this is how we started. We started with these kind of numbers in the detection and the resolution time. And over the next 12 months, we improved their situation to Vanna. Oh, we lost some fonting there, but we were able to drop those numbers uh, in significant ways, and we ended up making their SecOps team more efficient, and it did allow them to redistribute their resources personnel wise within their SecOps team with their limited resources to be more effective. They were able to get more done. they were trying to control some of those issues of burnout within their team, and this was one of the things we helped them do. And
And let
so,
me share a little bit more to also tie it into some of the comments. I hear that about consistency with the great work. Absolutely. And also, how to maintain totally different bees. Absolutely. So how did we accomplish that with technology and just sharing this particular case? And that was back in 2015, we started to talk about it. Okay, what is that one solution? Going back into the earlier question. So at that point, we deployed network behavioral analytic, not
mhm,
expensive, you see them everywhere, that comic network behavioral analytic company. We actually take a smaller, innovative company and took this solution and ran with them. Why? It go back into our early stage talking about cost
right.
effectiveness. Not all the big company that we dealt with, they say, oh, no problem. Let me give you some trial. Let me give you something to work with. In fact, some of the company that we try to work with them, they don't even want to talk to us. All right, those, all right, we don't want to work with you either. So we focusing on the mid size, small size, because they provide the flexibility. They are more easier to work with. Not just because that we would like to take easy way out, but at least that we don't have to go through the ego with some of the big companies. All right, so let
Those
me
big
get that
companies
out
will
of my
help.
chest.
Those big companies like Microsoft just say, "Well, what's it going to cost? $10." Well,
Well, in
I
fact,
I
that we
can't
went through
afford
that
$10. I
exercise.
need a better price. Okay, I'll charge
Yeah.
you two $5 bills.
So, so let's get that is out of the way. Go back into what we. So we start with network behavioral and analytic. We know this is a 1 year trial. We know this is what we need to get out. Get into to answer known the unknown. That was the objective. All right. So we start putting it into the headquarters, about 330 employees with the visitors and contractors in and out in that one location. And when we started off that we going through now what they call the ITSM, basically to me is help desk. So we go through that process, using web parsing the ticket from the NBA solution,
Mhm.
parsing the ticket and put them into category and then send them to the help desk system that they have. So we keep track of those tickets and we look at the keyword and start assigning people. On a weekly basis, what we did is we went through those tickets, and this is not in the, I would say, just starting in the help desk level. Actually, daily basis, they would start looking at the tickets. Some of them they can address. If it's anything to do with security, they would escalate to us, and we would look at we would have our engineer look at the security issue and start putting out the report and how to resolve it. So that's the starting point. So weekly, going into monthly, we get together with them and with our security analysts to sit down with the IT ops to go through those tickets to identify what is the trend or what are the trends among those tickets. And that's when we start looking into the risk trending analysis, which is a very powerful tool. It's very abstract. Yes, risk trending analysis, it could mean a lot of things. But in addressing some of your comment about maintaining consistency, when you look at the risk trending analysis, there it tells a lot of story, how the company operate,
Right.
how the end user operate, how the IT administrator operate, how the business executive operate. We're not profiling, we're just looking at the fact and then putting better policies and procedures to improve the whole and more of like a preventive at that point as a preventive maintenance to stop those things from happening, to let the end user know, hey, we are monitoring it. Yes, you could use it, but we just want to let you know there could be a potential risk by serving a certain website. Of course, that we start narrowing down what are the well, we did that in the beginning, what kind of website they can serve, IP address, and all of that. All of you already know that. But we're looking at the behavioral and tracking how the users behaving when they surfing the internet and start putting better policies, procedures with the upper management's approval because we want to make sure it matches with the culture of the company. So we don't want to just enforce technology rules. We want to make sure it matches with the company objective.
Right.
However, by bringing this awareness and better policies and procedure, refining the existing policies and procedure, that's how we were able to achieve this result. That's just on the security incident side of it
Yeah.
within 12 months. And in fact, that we see it's already increasing after 3 months after we implement it. It's all about human behavior. Now, the MTTR, that's what we're talking about. So there's only two statistics that we are so focused on
Yep.
is mean time to detection and then mean time to resolution, not response,
Yeah.
resolution. Because we have been in managed service for so many years. That's why we know you're telling the IT team, oh, you got a problem. It's just like the commercial talking about that security guard. Oh, your bank is being robbed. Yeah, I see all those robbery in your bank, but hey, I'm just the one that's going to report to you. I'm not going to do anything about it. No, that's not what we are trying to accomplish. We try to accomplish the work together. So that's what we did on this particular case. And again, that was back in 2015. By the time we done was 2016. That we were able to reduce the IT team's resolution rate on what we find from the network behavioral analytic by 99%.
Yeah.
Because we were able to classify, then put it onto the risk trending. And besides some of the IT policy, and I mentioned about IT administrator, you guys would love it. And I'll tell you that story in a second. And then what they're going to talk about is, okay, every month when we talking about, well, how can we improve? How can we improve? So after we're looking at all these trends coming from the behavioral analytic, and that's just one tool. Think about all the firewalls. Think about all the servers that is related to it. It start getting to tighten up and provide a much better cyber resilience
Right.
for that organization. And now, 7 years later, they
Yeah.
said, well, yeah, we're happy where we are. What is the next one solution? Okay, now I told you I'm going to talk about the IT administrator. So this organization, they have, different part of the world, they have their own IT team as well. Small IT team, but they work together. So of course, we know VPN connected into the back end of the network. IT always have the privilege to try out local technology, local applications. So this one particular area in Asia that the IT admin, okay, that person needs to open up the firewall port to test the new anti-malware within the region. Fine, everything is great. But the policy is supposed to say 30 days later, you need to lock it down. Or when you're done, you lock it down. Forgotten. Well, we all know how that goes. We all forget things. By 35 days or somewhat into the we start looking at that. Okay, so we got the ticket, the port is open, fine, it's approved, everything. So 30 somewhat days later, well, the port is still open. Oh yeah, we still may be testing it. 60 days into it or something in that. How come it's still open? Then just by these 3 tickets, so to speak, that we see the trend. Oh, this person have forgotten to shut down the port. It's violating against the policy. And this is the type of things that by looking at the risk trend to able to help you to identify what could be a minor issue in the beginning, but it could be a disaster if a hacker gain hold of that port, and that's the end of the story. So
We had that other company that called us, that the CEO during this pandemic sent all the employees home, but wanted everybody to be able to work remotely from home. And so he told the IT guy to open up the RDP port. The guy opened it up, and it was open to the world. Somebody got in there, encrypted everything. They got the ransom demand. They had no backups. They weren't going to pay, and they lost everything because they didn't go back and check to make sure that they ended up closing it when he brought everybody back in. So,
well, we don't want to scare you all. We all heard this type of story. So let's move on,
yeah.
Sean.
So, with this one, we were looking at some things that they have been doing, and they've been doing patching based upon the CVSS scores, and that's been well and good for a long time for a lot of people. There's really not a better way to do it in the past, and recently there's been some research done on looking at the CVSS score and looking for if there's exploitable code out there against those vulnerabilities, and then if there are exploitation codes out there, you patch those first and then work your way through everything else. And that brings a certain amount of efficiency to the organization and securing it. And we are looking at tools that prioritize based upon your environment. And that is bringing close to 500% efficiency and security increases to the organization because it's being mapped to your organization. So that lowly 4.3 CVSS is being addressed because it exposes the greater part of the vulnerability in the network than that 9.8. And in the past, you would have done that 9.8, 9.7, 9.6, all the way down. And maybe you get to that 4.3 by the time you do the next scan, but maybe you don't. So it's really important to look at different ways of prioritizing your patch management. And this is one of the things we were just talking with them about because this is an area that they don't need to necessarily go get a whole new tool for, a whole new solution for, a whole new investment, and a tool to learn. And this is a better way of doing some things because it'll increase some efficiencies and stretch out that budget that's so tight for them right now. And we do this with our security and risk assessment. And you don't necessarily need to use our security and risk assessment tool. You can use any sort of security risk assessment that is appropriate, that you feel meets your needs, your organization needs, is affordable to your budget. And so, Stanley, it's important that organizations identify a proper way to maximize their resources in their organization to secure and be able to do this. Is normal basic cyber hygiene for an IT department, being able to patch your systems. And so we get back to this pin drop. The pin drop is identifying where you are today. What is risked in the organization's network? And so we do so back in the day, this would have been far more labor intensive to do. You wouldn't be doing this on a regular basis. You wouldn't be doing penetration tests on a regular basis. But technology is advanced to a point where we can do exploitation, internal pen test, external pen test, and web application against the OWASP top 10 on an ongoing basis, testing automatically the entire network, all IPs, and identifying critical security control configurations mapped to the GRC or a framework to ensure that what should be off is off and what should be on is on. And ports that are left open are closed when they're supposed to be closed. And doing this as a first step tells you where is your starting point. How am I going to start this journey from where we are today to where we want to go? And doing this on an ongoing basis helps develop that trending analysis to illustrate to the organization's management that we are improving, we are getting better, we are lowering our risk. The things and tools that we're investing in, the people that we're investing in, is making this organization more secure, less susceptible to an incident, and less susceptible to an audit from a regulatory agency if it's going to come to that.
Yeah, and one point that I would like to add, and it ties into our audience comment about maintenance and consistency. And now some of you already know that we have done a survey, and that's how you get connected with us, and to how do you do your penetration testing.
Yeah.
And most of you come back with, we do it, semi-automatic. We have using automatic tools, and then we have a manual tester, pen tester to evaluate or further exploitation. And I totally agree with the manual part, because that's how we started our business in vulnerability scanning 17 years ago, when there's no tools available. We have to do it manual process. But at the end, later on, we couldn't do it. One is because we could not do it consistently.
Hmm.
After maybe 4 or 5 years, because our pen tester or vulnerabilities, assessment, the security analyst found another job, or the vendor that we subcontracting, they got better offers, because it's a trending thing. Everybody, it's like looking for pen tester nowadays, and even big corporation cannot hire them fast enough. So that's the shortage of resources,
Yeah.
human resource, human capital. The cost is increasing. And the third part, what we worry the most, is when we have to rely on a human or a small team of human to consistently produce the result. How good is that result? As management, as a guy that don't even have an admin right to my own desktop, now I don't even know how to evaluate that. That's what, when we start shifting 2 years ago into the fully automated penetration
Hmm.
tests. And the reason is that is, one, because it reduces the cost and it brings up the efficiency, brings down the cost. At the same time, the most important part, it provides consistency.
Yeah.
And with that consistency, then we can accurately looking at the data and looking at the risk trending to identify what are the problem, what are the root cause. So we'll go back into better policies and procedure to address them.
Yeah, it's important on that consistency and thoroughness and the currency. How current are the tools to exploit the network and the internally and externally? How current are those? And this automated testing tool really ensures that it's the latest and greatest opportunity tools that are out there to test the environment. And so, again, the continuous validation with trending analysis helps you drop pins on your journey from where you are when you started to where you're going over time. And the pin dropping over time, same reason people like looking at stock price charts. It
Yeah,
maps where the company has been, where the tough times have been, where they've done well. Same sort of thing. You want to be able to see that mapping and that trending analysis.
yeah, and that tied into Rick's comment, complicated by open source governance, which many
Mhm.
companies do poorly and are used to Microsoft automated patch management, or have a mix of Linux and MS stacks. Yes, and that's, I want to address is why we move away from vulnerability scanning, human processes, and try to adapt into as many fully automated tools as possible, including redeveloping the blockchain data lake to enhance the data privacy and sovereignty, and then using machine learning as we heading towards that direction in our development. But going back to address Rick, your comment, I think it's getting very complicated. Obviously, human capital is not enough to address all these issues. And at the same time, like Sean had repeated several times, the budget is tight, especially with the pandemic nowadays, or even before the pandemic. The easiest part is to squeeze the IT department. And we see that all the time in our past. But going back into from semi-automatic and complications by open source governance, many different stacks, and how they don't, some of them don't even interoperable, by bringing all these data from different various systems into a single dashboard to plot out the trend, to see the trend. And that is the starting point, as part of our starting point of the pin drop.
Mhm.
Because most of the IT folks out there, I know because I talk to them all the time, they have to look at least five, six different panels, bunch of Excel spreadsheets, and using that to communicate to the upper management. So how efficient is that? By the time that you gathered all those reports, it might be delayed already. It might be a week old, a month old. All these different solutions out there that complicating the whole matter, which they are necessary and combined to everything we said earlier, it just make it to us is impossible for any organization to continue to manage the way they are doing it right now. And that's why we need to change how we deal with data, how we deal with solutions, how we deal with objective by starting to put a pin drop, communications, collaborations, and improve the process along the way. It's a progressive it's a progressive process, step at a time, but it has to start from somewhere.
Yeah. So with the CRG system, the cyber risk governance system, let's look at these three areas of risk mitigation, which IT is constantly doing. And then there's progressions that we think we need to look at. And then there's a cost perspective. And the cost perspective is really going to help how you communicate back to management and explain things to them in a way that they understand. Part of the whole foundation of the cyber risk governance, our approach to this is we understood that the three stakeholders, the executives, the governors, the internal auditing team and risk team, and the IT team, the technologists, between those three, they all sort of speak their own language. And it's not always an easy conversation when the three of them are trying to talk to each other because they just kind of talk past each other. They're talking about the same thing. They just come at it from different ways. And when I started working with Stanley a few years ago, we were on a lot of calls, and I spent a lot of time Googling everything because IT certainly has their own language just to figure out what people were saying to each other on these calls. So
and
let's
don't
look at
forget the
these.
acronyms. What
Yeah,
do you mean?
all these acronyms. So I fallen into a couple times the CRG system, the cyber risk governance system. So Stan, let's
The
go on to the risk.
GRC, the CRG. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
anyway, we go back into, I think that's one important point that I like to address is, where do we start with this strategy? It's not something, I woke up in the middle of the night and start making it up. No, this is something I look at the World Economic Forum
right.
to start looking at this type of problems and the complications of it. Human element, it comes down to something that we try to address. And this is start of the communication of risk mitigations. And so even though the World Economic Forum has this strategic intelligence, everybody can look it up. I look at the complexity of that map. If any one of you, haven't not seen it, highly advise you go take a look at it.
World
And
Economic
connect
Forum
me
is,
in LinkedIn. I'll send you the link to it. It's easy.
yeah.
I will put it up there, and has been up there. So if you look at that map, then I looking at it. Okay, we all know cybersecurity more of a horizontal. It adapt into a lot of things, but and then continue to boil down from the technology, security, governance perspective. We answer a lot of third-party auditors' call. We have to help our client to answer those questions all the time.
Yeah.
And then we see that, I see that, boy, there's a lot of communications that needs to be boiling down, have a single dashboard that they can see to start addressing the issue. I'm not saying fixing it. I'm just saying to start the communications and collaborations. And that's what we don't see at this point. And that's why we need to change. And even though anybody can do it, you can do it with an Excel spreadsheet, a glorified Excel spreadsheets. Yes, knock yourself out. Just making sure those cell doesn't change when you're changing from one version to another. So these are the things that we talking about and narrowing down into these 5 progressions.
Right. So identify the gaps with automation. Automation is going to help you identify the entire landscape of gaps quickly and consistently to fill those gaps in. and automation is the only way you're going to be able to do it. It's getting too big within an environment to try to do it any other way. Increased collaboration for ROI insights or strategies. So if it's in gathering all of this, bring the other stakeholders into the conversation and illustrate. You can do that, the ROI over time, with that trending analysis. Here's how we're doing it. Here's where we're investing. Here's where we're spending the money. Here's where we're spending the efforts. These are the progressive improvements we're making to make us better at what we're doing. And you can do that with data visualization, with trending analysis to bring that ROI. So that's facilitating the decision making as well. And bringing data visualization to that conversation helps illustrate that, because people like graphs, people like numbers. Numbers don't lie. And consolidating all of the results for this risk trending analysis. And then you were able to develop preventive measures to increase the cyber resilience of the organization. So doing these 5 progressions is going to help you communicate more clearly and comprehensively to the organization with the data visualization, where you don't need to generate reports, create graphs. The system's doing it automatically for you, pulling in from all the tools you're using, all the inputs that you're putting into the system already from other resources that you have.
You now talking about technology, Sean. From the C-level point of view, I don't understand what you're talking about. So that's why we making an attempt to try to put it into the right perspective for the non-technical people.
Right.
It's like
Well, it's to help
technical
you
versus non-technical. That's
to
like
help technical talk to the non-technical people. Talk to them in the language they understand.
right. So that's why
Yeah.
we love your feedback in our CRG group. Please, this is where I and Sean try to, frame this type of conversation for the non-technical people and put it into the perspective about ROI, right? So this is our perspective, and we love to have your input into helping us to make this better. We're not an economists or finance people, but this is where we believe how your solution, or any solutions that you're about to purchase or select or in existing, we got to take a look at it from a different angle and to start that communication process. Well, is that solution, revenue generation? Well, that's an easy one. The upper management say, yeah, if we don't have that, we cannot make the revenue. That's an easy one. No problem. Buy more. Here's the money. Well, does it make any impact to the company to generate revenue? Yes and no, right? Then going even further down, efficiency. Now we're talking about the whole corporation efficiency, the processes we talked about earlier. Is it generating efficiency with these solutions? Or we're going to start customizing it? Does it create more efficiency? Well, how do you measure efficiency? Again, if you don't have a pin drop, you have no idea what your trending analysis is, then you cannot justify this type of efficiency. You don't know where it is. You don't know, your data is all over the place. Finally, efficiency impact. Well, this is the one that we're saying that, like vulnerability scanning. Well, a lot of people have purchased and sunk the investment into vulnerability scanning. And now there is penetration testing that can do vulnerability scanning and more. Well, do we still need our vulnerability scanner? Yes, if you need to comply to PCI DSS you need to have an ASV that authorized scanner to complete that PCI DSS certification process. But not many companies really need to certify to be PCI DSS. You might use it as a framework to guide your company along, but there are other vendors already taking care of that piece. So you got to check with your vendor, your supply chain vendor. Well, are they going to be
source?
Yeah. And there is open source, but they might not able to certify, as the ASV vendor in the PCI DSS. But if that's because what you need, then you need to look at, well, can my vendor do that part? Can it be outsourced to somebody to do it? So I can take that away from your existing infrastructure. One less thing to deal with. So we just want to start for helping you to communicate with your upper management. And with this as a perspective, that's why we call it perspective, our perspective at this point, and able to start framing the communications and collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we got a few minutes left. We would like to, of course, I got to do my sales pitch, right, Sean? So, well, but as Sean and I said, we use open source. We go leverage with nonprofit organization. It's not a secret, such as like Center for Internet Security. And we've been working with them. We're so happy with them. We encourage you to join the membership if you can. If you don't have the human resource to do it, that's where we're coming from. The human capital to bridge that gap. So that's where we're coming in from and leveraging all these existing solutions, proven solutions, or new innovative technologies. We compile them together as our ecosystem right in the center on our chat. But we're starting with Sarah, the pin drop, aggregating all this data that whatever you have in the solution as much as we can by doing an unbiased and in conjunction with your existing data into the risk indicator, okay? And then showing the map, and hopefully with some of our consulting partners that your organization can afford, can provide the turn-by-turn direction, how to get to the GRC, governance, risk, and compliance issues, objectives, I should say. So all of that, putting into the partnering with ecosystem, put the data into our blockchain data lake, which is in the future, and then automate the whole process. Well, some people challenge me, well, am I going to lose my job? No, we are not taking any jobs away. In fact, that there are 3 million shortage in the world if you have not looked at the report. Why are you worried about that? The whole thing is how we can improve some of the junior staff's awareness, understanding, learning about the new tools, processes in the market space, change their perspective. Don't just going to be doing desktop support, be forever doing desktop support. Our team has, every one of them has to deal with issue in InfoSec. So information security, IT, cybersecurity, they all going to be lumped into one. And I said it before, the governors, the internal auditor, eventually going to be, the chief compliance officers, eventually going to take over IT. So we better start learning about all these new languages in the governance point of view. Thank you, Fernando. And he's just dropping off another meeting to go. And all of these that, yeah, I see that he was asking about money, so we're going to get to him, of course, that we won't miss any sales opportunity. But at the same time that what we're talking about is to go back into the whole process. How do you automate it? And that's why I'm working with data scientists, universities, research organizations to try to speed up the process. And if anybody that, they research institutes that have funding to burn, then please contact me. I would love to work with them. I would love to share the whole CRG direction with them and try to collaborate with them and make our life a lot easier. So this is where we sum it up into showing you what we're talking about in the risk indicator. These are the dashboard environment, how we aggregate the data, and starting with Sarah with the pin drop. And then why the CRG system? Sean?
Yeah, the CRG, the cyber risk governance system, really is. It is a system to bring organizational risk to light to everybody in the organization, and to speak a common language. Data is a common language for everybody in an organization, and this is not necessarily another solution that's out there. It's a way to ingest all of that data to bring the risk to the organization, the governance risk and compliance risk. Where's your policy and procedure risk? Where's the documentation risk? What are those risks? And how out of compliance or in compliance are you to whatever regulatory or framework you're trying to achieve, and then match that up with all the technical controls, security controls that you have. Are you in or out of compliance on that side as well? Bringing that all together to a
Michael and
dashboard
Fernanda
environment.
asked that question. Does it exist?
Well,
Because the cost.
a single security solution doesn't necessarily exist. And Michael's right. If you have one solution to try to do everything, it's not going to really be able to do that. But a single solution to illustrate or to represent all of the data, the risk indicators in one dashboard, this is it. This is going to give the executive a comprehensive view of the organizational risk from policies, documentation, policies, procedures, and the technical side that they don't necessarily understand to give direction or guidance, but shows where the risks are. They control the purse strings, they control the budgets, they control how much money you're going to get. And if they
Well, I think the best thing we
understand,
wrap it up because we're already a minute late, Sean. I
all
think that
right,
come connect us. We'll
connect
show
with
you
us
with
on the
demo.
LinkedIn
We show
group.
you the demo so you can be the judge on your own.
Yeah.
We want to improve. We want to take your comment and improve. Well, thank you for a minute more than your time. Thank you, everybody, and we'll continue these discussions in our roundtable the next time. So we're going to start the roundtable discussion to drill down on what we talk about. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining
Really
us today,
appreciate it.
everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.